welcome back to Euphoric Escapes. A few months ago I went on an unforgettable trip to Bali, backpacking around for about 3 weeks. I have been jam-packed, so I literally haven't had time to get around to the content until now. Bali has so much to offer, and funnily enough, after COVID I've seen a huge fluctuation in the tourism, which is great for the Balinese people, as I'm sure we all know how much they did struggle throughout COVID. A lot of businesses unfortunately did have to close down. But there is literally so much to do in Bali, so it can be pretty overwhelming when deciding what to do within your amount of time that you have. I made this huge itinerary before we went, and I really wasn't quite sure that we were going to be able to follow it all through. But luckily we didn't really have to rush any place that we did visit. I feel like we had a substantial amount of time in each place that we went to. So feel free to use my Bali itinerary or just use it for a rough guide for your travels. Don't forget to like the video below and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the video.
So I wasn't really too sure whether to stay in the Seminyak area. I'd heard a lot of mixed things about it, but it was fairly close to the airport. I knew that I didn't want to go to Kuta because everyone just said how much they hated it, but I thought Seminyak, maybe. We'll see how it goes. So we spent 2 days there, 2 nights. This is the beach. As you can see, it's not quite the picturesque postcard, but in my opinion, I'd say it's still worth it because it's nice to see a different side of Bali where the nightlife's always busy. This one might be pretty obvious, but don't even use the water to brush your teeth, let alone drink. Just avoid that Bali belly. So I didn't actually pre-book a taxi to meet me at the airport because I just wanted to see what the situation was like when we got there. But Mum did, and we both went with Bluebird taxis, which are a pretty reputable company. If you're staying local, I wouldn't say it made too much of a difference in the price whether you book or not, but if you are staying further away in the island, I would say to book. On our first day, we went to a cafe called Kind Cafe, and it's completely vegan. I thought it was the cutest little thing, and I'm sure you've probably all seen it on Instagram already, but literally everything on the menu is plant-based. The staff was so lovely, I would highly recommend it. Even if you aren't vegan, it's super delicious. We went to Peti Tenget Beach, not quite sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll hope for the best. It was pretty similar to Seminyak Beach. Now this one's a travel hack for all of my hostel and budget hotel lovers. Most 4 or 5 star hotels around the world will actually allow you to use their hotel facilities as long as you spend their chosen minimum amount per day on food or drinks. So it's a win-win situation. You get those Instagram pics and you get to save your pennies. So there's a few different ways that you can get around the island, the most popular ones being the scooter or a chosen driver that you usually keep throughout your stay. This can sometimes be cheaper because you basically become a loyal customer of the driver and they'll give you good deals and you make a friend out of it too. Our main driver was super lovely and reliable, and his name was Jimmy. If you guys are planning on coming to Bali and want his number, I will leave it in the description below. On day 3, we left Seminyak and got a taxi down to Canggu. And let me just tell you, we didn't book any of these hotels in advance, only the one that we were staying in for the first 2 nights when we got there. So we literally just woke up in the morning, had a look on all of the booking websites and booked it then and there on the spot. The price of our hotels throughout our stay literally ranged from £5 to £100. Something I thought that was particularly different is the fact that no one fills up their own fuel. You just drive in and the staff do it for you. I literally hate filling up my own fuel, so I wish they did this elsewhere. Now what she was explaining is how they make coffee out of cat poop. Yep, you heard that right. It's like a delicacy here, and apparently it's one of the most expensive coffees in the world, but there's tons of them around the whole island, so I can guarantee you one of your drivers will probably bring you to one of them because they do actually get commission. Now one of the main temples in Bali is Tanalot. It's the one that you'll most likely see on the front of the postcards, and it's only a short drive away from Canggu Centre. You pay a small admission fee to get inside, and then once you're inside there are small extras that you can pay for as well, including going to see the temple up close and personal. If the tide is high, you will have to get a little bit wet to walk over to the temple, so be prepared. Just note, you cannot go inside the temple itself. You pay the small extra fee just to walk over to get an up-close view of the temple itself and splash yourself with holy water. But honestly, you can get just as good views from all of the temple grounds. Here they had some more luwaks, which we were talking about earlier, and we saw some bats. I had never seen bats in real life before. I thought this was so cool. I had heard of this before, but it just reminded me how controversial it is that you can't go in temples if you're on your period as a female. When we arrived, we'd heard a few people talking about this new club that had opened only 2 weeks previous to our arrival called Atlas, so we had to go and check that one out. I'm not gonna lie, this has to have won some sort of record for the biggest club or biggest beach club in the world, because it was huge. I will insert a time lapse of me walking from one side to the other. Just like most clubs, you do have to pay a small entry fee, and then on top of that, it's honestly quite expensive for drinks. You're talking big city prices, so make sure you do drink enough before you go, if you are drinking, of course. I think Finn's Beach Club has definitely got some competition on their hands, and the one thing I love about this place is the staff are so lovely, and they even had fireworks. There's a ton of restaurants and direct access to the beach, so you can come and go as you please. At Atlas, we met some people and headed on to the next club, and this was probably my favourite one in the whole of Bali that we went to. If you're into your hardcore underground techno, then this is the place you need to go. It's called Vault, and it's open till the very early hours of the morning. Okay, we were a little hungover in the morning, but what's a backpacking trip without a little bit of anxiety? And it's nothing a matcha latte can't fix. But how cool is that? In that cafe, every single thing on the menu is made with matcha. For our last night in Canggu, we took a short ride from the south to the north of the area, just so that we could experience a different sort of vibe. The hotel we stayed in was called Kubudima, and I think this was the cheapest hotel we stayed in for our whole time here, and let me just say, it definitely exceeded our expectations. The closest beach to us was called Tegenungan, and although I wouldn't say it's the best beach, it definitely has a lot of atmosphere. And we went for dinner at this restaurant, which is so cool. It's like tree house vibes all around. We got up early in the morning to use the yoga deck and had some breakfast, which was actually included, I must add. I'm still taken back from how good of value this was for money, bearing in mind this was the £5 one, like I said before, and you get breakfast included for 2 people. Today we headed up with our driver to central Bali. First we went to a place called Tegenungan Waterfall, which is just before you head up to Ubud, which is where we were staying. It was quite busy on the day that we went there, so it was pretty hard to get photos without any tourists in, so I do advise to try and get there as early as possible. There was this really cool beach club there, which I would say definitely go and see. You can either get lunch there or you can pay a one-day entry to use their facilities. They even have the famous Bali swing there overlooking the waterfall. Our last stop of the day before we actually headed to our accommodation to check in was the monkey forest. You can pay for entry at the door. There's no need to pre-book beforehand, so ignore any tours or anyone that tries to sell you the tickets outside. The monkeys are all pretty well kept here. They're free to roam wherever they want, even outside the park. But it can be a little bit scary. Some of the monkeys are quite feisty, so just remember not to look them in the eye. After we'd had dinner, it was pretty late at this point by the time we did reach our accommodation, but I have to tell you, this is possibly one of the coolest places I have ever stayed. We booked this accommodation on Airbnb, but it's actually a hotel called Firefly, which was featured on a Netflix show. That's how awesome it is. The thing that I love about this place is that each room is so different to the next. They have domes, they have private villas, they have tree houses, you name it all. I stayed in the tree house and it's very popular, so make sure to plan ahead and book in advance if you do want to stay here. You literally feel like you're in the Jungle Book in this tree house. I mean, look at it. There's not even any doors or windows there in place, so make sure to bring that insect repellent. This here is the dome, and this is actually 3 different types of rooms that you can book, and they're just stacked on top of each other. You just climb the ladder to get to each one. The next day we decided to head up to the rice fields Bali style, so we hired some scooters from the hotel and took it for a spin. Now this is actually a pretty funny story on the scooters. Neither of us had ever driven one, and I decided to pluck up the courage to drive there, and I went down, but I was too petrified to get up the hill because it was so steep. But eventually we asked some locals to help us up the hill. The next morning I had some of the best French toast I've ever had, and we went to look around one of the main temples in Ubud. We were super sad to be checking out of the accommodation that day, but it was just setting us up for our highlight of the whole trip in regards to accommodation. I made a whole video on this place on my TikTok, and you guys seem to love it, and I can absolutely see why. It's so beautiful. It looks over the whole of the jungle in a rural part of Bali near Ubud. They had a private masseuse sent to our accommodation in the afternoon just for a small extra cost. As well as this, they hand you a menu upon arrival asking if you'd like dinner delivered later that evening. The staff here was so lovely, and we couldn't have asked for better service. We had dinner and some drinks upstairs on the net that they have on the balcony while we were watching a movie before we headed down to bed, and this was the view that I woke up to. You know when you're on holiday and you just forget that you've gone to sleep in a certain place and you wake up and you're just so happy, you just have this smile on your face? That was me. We got a taxi to our next stop, which was a place called Mason Elephant Park, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys here. I'm not sure if this is a place that I exactly want to recommend. I'd always wanted to ride an elephant, and when I visited Sri Lanka a few years back, it just didn't feel right. The elephants didn't seem happy, and I thought I'd wait for a better time. This place that I found looked a lot more established. However, after visiting, I had read a few different opinions of people saying that it wasn't ethical. I made an Instagram post on this a few months back, but basically what I'm trying to say is just do your research and do what feels right for the animals. The next morning we got up bright and early. I'm pretty sure we left around 3:30 from our hotel because we booked onto a tour of a sunrise hike up Mount Batur. I've got to say this was pretty difficult, and if you don't at least have a medium level of fitness, I wouldn't even try and attempt it. But this was easily one of my favourite activities that I did on this whole trip. I mean, look at that sunrise. Now, of course, you don't have to be with a tour group to be able to hike up the mountain. It is public property. You can stay in the area the night before and hike up yourself. However, I had read online that it's not highly advised. This is because there is people called the mountain mafia. These are basically people that will try and scam you and claim that they have to be paid before you can go up. This is not true, of course, but they have said to be violent in the past of people that haven't paid. So we just wanted to avoid that at all costs. And we are in Bali, so there is going to be those pesky monkeys around looking for food, so just be careful and keep your belongings on you at all times. That evening we went to go see a traditional Balinese dance. There's lots of different versions that you can go and see, but the one we went to see was called the Kikak dance. The tickets aren't too expensive, but there aren't a lot of seats there, so the tickets do tend to sell out midday. There's various vendors around the city that will be selling them for all sorts of different prices. However, just be sure to check that you are getting them from a legitimate vendor. Try and get there at least half an hour before the show starts because there are no seat allocations and you will be guaranteed a better seat if you get there earlier. When I was originally planning my itinerary for this trip, I did have Nusa Penida and the Gili Islands. However, I think I got a bit too overexcited because I didn't want to have to rush everything, so eventually I did have to decide between doing one or the other. So we came straight from Ubud to the port that takes you over to the Gili Islands. It was absolute chaos here. There were so many people in line with their suitcases. No one was telling us what was going on, and they were trying to pack everyone onto these tiny little boats. But we ended up getting there eventually, and we were absolutely starving and dehydrated and hot at this point, so we headed straight to the first cafe and got some food. The thing that I love about the Gili Islands is that there's no motor vehicles at all. The only two modes of transportation are horses and bicycle. I would always pick the bicycle, however, we were staying on the other side of the island and we had all of our luggage with us, so there was literally no other option. As soon as we got to the hotel, we headed out to enjoy the sunset on the little swing in the ocean. You'll find a lot of these on the Gili Islands. I really wanted to do one of those cute Instagrammable flower baths. I had seen one in Ubud, but it was so expensive, whereas I found this one, which was a lot more reasonable. It's right on the main strip of Gili T. It was kind of cold, but I will say the flowers smelt nice and I got some good pictures, so a win's a win. I'm sure you're going to want to get a mani-pedi at some point here. I would say just give it a miss. The nail varnish did chip off within 24 hours. That night we headed out, started off doing drinks at a place called Mad Monkeys, which is a hostel chain. They have them all around the world. We had an awesome night out in Gili T. It's definitely the main party island of the three of them. A little hack here if you want to use it. We were planning on going snorkeling the same day as we were planning on heading to the other island. So instead of going snorkeling then getting a boat, we went snorkeling, took all our bags on the boat, and because it was stopping at the other island, we just got off there, which saved us money and time. And this isn't one of those snorkeling trips where maybe you'll see something. We saw all sorts: turtles, sea cucumbers, I even got stung by a jellyfish. Don't let that put you off. Once we arrived at Gili Air, we sat down for lunch so that we could book accommodation for that night. We literally didn't even have anywhere to book yet, but we found this cute little villa in the area which was only £10 each per night, so me and Mum ended up getting our own little villas, and it was run by this lovely family. It's called Sante if you want to stay there yourself. Gili Air is very different from Gili T. Gili T is much more busy and vibrant and party style. However, Gili Air I'd say is a lot more mellow and quiet and naturally beautiful. If you are staying in a budget hotel or a hostel, one travel tip that I'll give you is if you head to a more expensive hotel, most of the time if you buy a drink or two, they will let you use their services such as a swimming pool. Just check with them that they don't have a minimum spend, but most of the time this is what I do. A warning to the next clip: look at these disgusting toilets. You do not want to be using them. Make sure that you go for a pee at the hotel before you head over to the port. Sadly, our trip at the Gili Islands was coming to an end and we were heading on our way to our last stop, which was Uluwatu. The boat ride on the way back was nowhere near as bad as it was on the way over there, but still it was very chaotic. It was about an hour and a half late with no information to what was going on. We had to wade our way back to shore, so if you are coming on these boats, just make sure that you're wearing some sort of skirt or shorts with easily removable shoes. We called our regular driver Jimmy to come and pick us up from the port to take us over to Uluwatu, and it was a pretty expensive journey, but luckily we met some people that were also going there, so we shared the taxi fare. Our last accommodation on this trip was a small set of wooden bungalows right near the centre of Uluwatu. It was pretty good value for money, and it was nice just to chill out after having a very busy past 3 weeks. And also at this point we were both getting pretty sick and run down, so we decided just to take it slow. The next day we decided to head to Uluwatu temple. Of course you do have to cover up when you go into the temples, and at the gates they will hand you a sarong to wrap around your legs for men and women. It can get extremely crowded here, so plan your day accordingly. Try and visit first thing in the morning when it opens. I would say, and I think a lot of people will agree with me, that Uluwatu is probably one of the more expensive cities within Bali. We were so hungry in the evening that, you know, when you just end up looking around all the menus and you can't decide what you want. This was us, and we were so tired and hungry by the end of the night we just picked this place, but it was a good choice. We were told that there was a beach near our hotel, but it was pretty hard to find. That's one thing that I noticed in Bali. If someone says it's a 10-minute walk, it's a 20-minute walk. If it's a half an hour walk, it's a 1 hour walk. But eventually we ended up finding it after walking down a huge hill, which we were dreading walking up. The beach was called Nyang Nyang, and although the waves were too choppy to swim in and it was very secluded, it was also very quiet, so it was a nice difference to all the rest of the beaches in Bali that we'd been to so far. We hadn't eaten breakfast this day, and we were hoping just to grab lunch down at the beach, but there was literally nowhere to get any food. The only drink that they had were fresh coconut. Later that afternoon we headed down to Padang Padang Beach, which was where they were hosting the Rip Curl Annual World Cup for surfing, so that was very interesting to see. So we went down into this little cave bit, which was a small cove where it was all happening. Obviously it was quite far away, so it was hard to see. We ended up hiking up these rocks, and there were all other people around there, photographers and things, where we got a pretty decent view. But the atmosphere really lit up, and the fun started happening when the winner was announced and the after-party celebrations began. We didn't even know this event was happening till the morning of, and this is one of the things that I love about travelling, is you just end up experiencing and running into the most random events and people. As our time in Bali was drawing to a close, we had our last meal, which was a curry, since I was really craving one that evening. We had an early night, ready to get up for the airport first thing in the morning. So thanks for sticking around. I hope this has either helped inspire you to come see this beautiful country or helped with your own planning. Hit the follow button below and let me know if you have any questions about Bali.